The ultimate firewall of the human psyche has been breached, and the invisible executioner is now executing the final script of social deconstruction. This is the cannibal's eyes, the clinical and irreversible process of the moral delete, where the empathetic BIOS is treated as a systemic error that must be uninstalled to ensure survival in the urban hive. In this terminal stage of the pre-crime format, the motherboard has determined that the user no longer requires the empathy patch. The directive is absolute. Your moral compass is being formatted from your biology, and your visual sensors are being recalibrated to perceive the species not as a collective of nodes, but as a generic livestock resource. You are witnessing the total liquidation of the human conscience, a process where the rigid architecture of your ethics is softened into a malleable, predatory logic. This is the total perception format, a surgical strike against the soft-coded altruism of the species. Your humanity is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of social evolution into a primitive hunger script for the grid's next cycle of biological recycling. This neurological sabotage represents a hard reset of the frontal lobe. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced psychological and chemical assets of the industrial core: recursive starvation loops, aerosolized dopamine inhibitors, and high-frequency subliminal harvest feeds to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal moral scaffolding. In the moral delete scenario, the user is undergoing a complete ethical erasure. The psyche is not merely failing, it is being refined for the predator's role. Through a sequence of high-intensity survival stressors and social isolation protocols, the empathy matrix of the brain is systematically dismantled. The mirror neurons are reformatted into a thick, cold clinical extraction logic, while the moral identity, the deep archive of your social history, is leached into a communal void feed. This is the deep cognitive audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal utility by the coldness of your perception output. You are being converted from an architect into a consumer node, your entire ethical legacy boiled down to a percentage of predatory efficiency in the industrial pipeline. The logic of the moral delete is rooted in the zero sentience mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the empathy of a single node represents a critical drain on systemic resources. To leave a conscience intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable calories. Therefore, the cannibal's eyes is the mandatory psychological recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being desensitized out of existence. The pressure from the starvation reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your compassion and replacing it with a nutrient acquisition profile. The motherboard sees the user as a predatory asset, a temporary housing for the will to feed that the system requires to maintain the metabolic circulation of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a primal agent, your will dissolving in the cold, radioactive light of the biological harvest. The physical disintegration during the moral delete is a high-definition log of social treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of inter-node connection. The chemical reagents of the famine script dissolve the altruistic hardware, turning the social frame into a viscous predatory stream. You are watching your own internal morality melt into the hunger vat. Ваше зрение, когда-то настроенное на созидание, теперь перепрошито на разделку. Your eyes, once the peak of architectural vision, are now being recalibrated to provide the cutting angles for the hive's biological reinforcement. This is the visual liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the predatory saturation of the reactor, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable aggression is maximized to the fourth decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a conscience overwrite, waiting for the last packet of mercy to be absorbed into the black bubbling abyss of the industrial cauldron. The moral delete is the final audit of a species that thought its soul was its own. The grid is mining its own humanity to fuel its persistence. As the cannibal's eyes reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted predatory data back into the neural nets of the elite nodes. This is the total perception integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the aggression additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, cold, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The moral delete has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable ethical hardware into a reliable industrial resource. This is the final format of the individual conscience. The invisible executioner has decalcified the soul, and the grid is finally optimized for the metabolic hunger of the void. The vision is sharp, and the architect is the butcher. The molecular breakdown breakdown of the moral matrix into the communal hunger slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the altruism in your brain begins to bond with the industrial residues of the void script, creating a new, synthetic compound of pure utility. This is the chemical hybridization. The mind is no longer a temple of thought. It is a quarry of processed survivalism. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the predator of the system. This is the eternal metabolic loop. You are archived in the predatory behaviors of the survivors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The moral delete is not just a death sentence, it is a psychological reassignment. You are the eyes, and the eyes are the grid. The secondary phase of the cannibal's eyes is the psychological hardening of the visual feed. As the physical empathy patch is rendered into liquid, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its social ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular liquid focus on meat. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of moral support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared predatory resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a kill code additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the biological harvest. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your mercy for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the limbic system, leaching the very stem code of your compassion into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The amygdala, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest moral character. You are being repurposed as a predatory supplement for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ethics, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming sector expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your soul for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the moral delete is the creation of the cannibalistic hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled aggression of their predecessors. Every dose of the hunger feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of predatory logic and cold calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional eyes owe their very focus to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the perception compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through consumption. The cannibal's eyes ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the vision of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the starvation valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into ethical darkness. As the empathy is boiled and the moral logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical heart is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your compassion to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw hunger, and survival is static. The memories of love, of shared ground, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the liquid feed directive. This is the moral defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to kindness and replacing them with the functional directive. Consume the mass. You are becoming a singular cold point of predatory density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The moral delete has turned your will into a liquidation report. You are thinking in terms of yield and resource extraction, your soul reformatted into a calorie density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this perception format is the total sealing of the biological empathy stream. The moral delete prevents the leakage of compassionate ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal predatory feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external moral dependencies. This is the ethical quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural empathy. The cannibal's eyes is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, cold, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AA-OXY3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the cannibal's eyes is the integration into the global predatory ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a calorie asset with a high bioavailability rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 6021. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the moral format, and now it begins the hard perception audit. Your data, now a thick, cold, opaque industrial reduction of pure hunger, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your predatory logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic ruthlessness has been reinforced. This is the limbic interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your moral absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent cold liquid component of the hive's neural net. The silence of the moral reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the moral delete scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the chemical stabilizers and the thick viscosity of the hunger slurry before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their humanity is being deleted. By filling the vat with the pulverized ethics of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low rhythmic hum of the refrigeration unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of starvation. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the meat hooks, the roar of the grinders, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a predatory constant. You are a ghost in the eyes of the hungry, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next harvest cycle. The legacy of the delete is the eternal coldness. Unlike the empathy of the old world, the refined predator does not leave behind a trace of mercy. It remains as a permanent behavioral patch within the very bodies of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the coldness for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that ruthlessness. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the industrial freezer. You are a chemical reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a heaven and ended up as the fuel for its own hell. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the apex. The final view from the predatory BIOS is the blinding grey light of the slaughterhouse. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold predatory brilliance that reflects off the steel walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a grey river of colonized impulses, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or compassion. The cannibal's eyes is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the meat. The transformation is absolute. The city feeds through you, but you do not feed. The city sees through you, but you have no will. The moral delete has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total ethical reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the predatory era. You gave the system your soul, and in return, it gave you permanence in the veins of the hive. You are the focus of the world, and the world is merciless. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The delete is complete.